Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too. So nearly a goodly morning.
So nearly. So near yet so far. I have to say, I haven't been that affected by an opposition goal in quite some time.
Describe what happened to me. Describe your emotions.
I felt like someone had just taken all the wind out of my body. It was, we got to 97, 98 minutes, whatever it was, because sitting there, I don't know how long that second half took for you, but for me it was about 3.5 lifetimes.
Yes.
And you go, 48 minutes, 52, 54, it's just the time went, and then you get to like 70 minutes, you're like, and then it's 80 minutes, 85 minutes, and then 90 minutes, and just absolutely sickened by the goal that went in and the timing of it, the effort that we put in, all of it. It really felt like a fucking kick in the balls, I have to say.
I hesitate to say this because I wouldn't want him to catch any flack for it, but I remember when City won that corner, I think it was Saliba who put the ball behind.
He did, yeah.
And he really celebrated after it, sort of beating the chest, shouting, looking to his teammates. And I got it, but I was also like, it's not quite done.
Yeah. It's one of those things that sticks in your mind because of what happened afterwards. If we just got the ball clear, we'd be talking about... I think you can't separate that sort of celebration from the defensive effort that kept City at bay for all that time,
Totally. But we definitely did switch off on that corner. They took it short really quickly and we weren't alive to it. But we had played... 53 minutes with 10 men against the best team in the world. So maybe a certain element of switching off is inevitable.
Yeah, we were into the 8th minute of 7 minutes added on in a half of football, which had more ball in play than any other game so far this season.
Yeah.
All of these things.
That's true, although that's not a complaint I've heard from many Arsenal fans. I have to say, I think we all know that we were buying time in that second half, and we're going to have time added on for it.
I agree, but like the Trossard sending off took place in the 8th minute of 6 minutes of injury time.
Yeah.
It just all these small things which are, not doing much for my blood pressure, but I think ultimately might prove, as counterintuitive as this sounds, might prove useful in a way for Mikel Arteta and for his team and for what remains of this season, what we still have to do in this season. I think there are games where you just get a feeling about how, even with disappointment, there is a lot to take from how it played out, what we did, what we endured, how we suffered, as Mikel Arteta might say, and what that might mean for us as a team, us as a fan base, for the manager, for the players. I felt yesterday like something, even before the way it all played out, in the first half, I felt like something had shifted in the rivalry between the two teams. Like it had gone up another level. There was another layer to this rivalry now, and it's because we are a serious fucking outfit, right? And City recognized that. And maybe we'll come a little bit later to talk of the dark arts or cynicism or time wasting or those kinds of things, which I think you and everybody listening would agree is a bit rich coming from a team like Manchester City. But the first couple of seconds of the game, when Rodri went down pretending he got hit in the face, I think just told you something about the way these two teams look at each other now, but in particular the way Manchester City look at Arsenal now.
I think so. I think it's both ways, to be honest with you. I think this was the most heated game between these two that there has been. I think clearly, that the rivalry, which has been quite tepid, I think it has been very based on mutual respect and, the history and relationship between the managers. And it's almost been framed as a kind of intellectual rivalry, tactical rivalry. Yawn. And I think yesterday we saw it sort of slightly boil over. I think Rodri is sort of absolutely at the heart of that. I think a lot of this will have stemmed from his comments at the end of last season when he said the difference between Arsenal and Manchester City was mentality. I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, after they came here and only played for a draw, we knew we would win the league.
Yeah.
And I don't think that happening and Kai Havertz effectively charging into him, although he made a lot more of it than he needed to after 14 seconds, I don't think that's coincidence, basically.
No, I don't think so. But actually, it's Rodri who steps across Havertz, and Havertz just leaves his shoulder there.
Yeah.
So, like you say, it works both ways. And like it was evident in maybe a challenge a few minutes later when Haaland just went clattering into Saliba.
Well, I think that's a personal thing as well. It seems Haaland against Saliba and Gabriel, he seems like a player who's acutely aware of how he's analysed and aware of, his performance and how it can improve. He will have known that last season Saliba and Gabriel had him in their pocket, and I think he carried that into this game. So it does come from both sides, and there is a bit of history there now. There is some real tension. I even think the managers, they play it very polite in the press conferences, but I'm not sure there are any two managers who want to beat the other one more in the Premier League. I mean, they are desperate to beat each other, and they might sit there and say, I have a huge respect for Arsenal, huge respect for Arteta or Guardiola. But look at Pep kicking his chair. Look at Arteta losing his mind after the sending off. I know it's about the league, but I think they are desperate to beat each other as well. So
I think you're right there, yeah.
Yeah, it's all spilling to the surface now, which is great. I mean, I love that. I grew up on the rivalry with Manchester United, which was about so much more than, the tactics and what 11 are they going to pick. It was all about personal vendettas, basically.
Yeah.
And it was a kind of feud. And I think it's great that we're seeing that now. And I think in a way, that's why it feels a little bit like we've arrived again.
No, I agree. I think there is, particularly after this game, it will be even more intense next time. This is not going away. Some of the comments from the Man City players afterwards, I'm sure, will be up on the Arsenal dressing room. The Haaland throwing the ball at the back of Gabriel's head after the equalising goal, which in the grand scheme of things, there was a lot more for me to get angry about yesterday than that, which I thought was actually quite funny. But Gabriel won't forget that. He won't forget that. And, it's gonna be there. And like I said, I think this rivalry has gone to a different level, a new level where it feels more personal. It was more physical. I think Manchester City have recognized that Arsenal are not a flash in the pan by any means. I think the fact that it has got more physical, I think the fact that they've been complaining tells you that, we are being taken very, very seriously here. And this is not a team that you can push around. This is not a team that you can bully. And if you want to give a bit out, you'll get a bit back. Maybe you'll get a bit in the first place, But there are still some really interesting things to discuss, above and beyond the fractious nature of some of it and some of the contentious decisions, whether you consider them that or not. And I think we do have to recognize that Manchester City pretty much dominated this game in the second half for very obvious reasons. In the first half, even though we got ourselves back into it, the opening 20 minutes or so, City were very, very much on top here and scored a goal. Haaland through Saliba and Gabriel, just for once, not quite on the same wavelength. He pokes it beyond David Raya. What was it, 8-9 minutes in? And you're 1-0 down. After that, I think we found it difficult. We found it difficult to contain City. We found it difficult to get our foot on the ball. And that can happen when you play this team, this Manchester City team, that they are so good. I think in some ways there was a little bit of crossover with the game last season where, that the idea that Arsenal only came to play for a draw, I think, is completely wrong. But because of the way the game transpired, because of how well City played for large swathes of that game, we just had to try and sit in and dig in and defend. And I think there was something similar, to the opening part of this game too.
Yeah, they started well, and we maybe didn't quite settle, as you would hope. There was a bit of a change in the back four with Calafiori coming in, and I think that took a period of adjustment. But it's interesting because in the light of that equaliser and the second half we saw, a lot of the narrative today is about Arsenal's resilience and their brilliance defending with 10 men and the organisation they showed in that second half. And I understand that. But for me, I think what we produced in the first half, to be on the back foot like that and concede the first goal at the Etihad, to turn that around in the space of 45 minutes, I think is pretty special. I can't think of many Arsenal teams previously that I would back to do that. In fact, I can think of quite the opposite. Teams who would ship the first goal and falter and crumble. And, we've seen that many times. And it just becomes a kind of sky blue tide washing over us.
Yeah.
But the fact that we went behind, didn't get our heads down, played our way back into the game, scored a couple of goals, might have scored another one off another set piece, and went in at half-time ahead, I think that's phenomenal, really. I just don't think there are many teams, full stop, in the Premier League who'd be capable of withstanding City and adapting and turning things round. And I was as proud of that, certainly, as I was of anything that we saw in the second half.
Sure, it's sort of what might have been at this point, but the idea of responding in that way, I was so excited for the second half, until such time as I wasn't. But you're right, it was a really incredible response. The danger and the threat that we pose from set pieces is obviously one thing, but we did get a goal from open play, and what a goal it was from the Italian stallion, Riccardo Calafiori. City not happy with the fact that the free kick wasn't taken from the right place, or Kyle Walker wasn't allowed back into position after Michael Oliver called him and Bukayo Saka over as the two captains. I have zero sympathy for this because, one, I think City were disorganised not just because of the referee calling Walker over, but because they'd lost Rodri and were just making a substitution that, perhaps if Rodri had still been on the pitch, he would have slotted into that kind of right-back position. But also, when the free kick was awarded, Bernardo Silva took the ball forward. He was the one that basically moved the ball to the wrong place. So I suppose first thing I should ask is, do you have any sympathy for City's complaints about that? And B, I think it is obviously a fairly significant development in the game that Rodri went off injured.
Massive about Rodri. You can't talk about the turnaround in the game without mentioning that. Whatever juju curse Kai Havertz placed on him in those first 14 seconds, it took a little while to work, but only a little while. As for the free kick, Andrew, we can't win. When we delay the restarts, they send us off. When we take them quickly, everyone complains. What do they want? I thought they wanted quick restarts.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair enough.
And that's what we gave them. The people asked for it. The PGMO asked for it. There you go. There's one. And hats off to Thomas Partey, who I thought had a better game overall yesterday.
Agree.
Really smart pass into Gabriel Martinelli, who, again, I thought this was a good day for. Picks out Calafiori. And, when that ball comes to him, you're thinking, I think he might hit this. But there's sort of only one conceivable finish. And yet, he manages to produce that conceivable finish. It's just incredible technique. Brilliant hit.
Oh, unbelievable. What a goal. It really was. What was it? I was going to say something there. I've forgotten what it was.
What did you make of him starting, Calafiori?
Well, obviously it was to do with Ben White being injured. And Ben White not being necessarily 100% fit to start, so you move Timber to the right. You've got Calafiori on the left, which made sense to me. He's one of the big summer signings. I think it showed, some faith in him and his readiness to play. And, I think he was a little bit caught out on the opening goal.
I agree, yeah.
Just, Savinho stepped inside a little bit too easily. I do think there was more to it, but, maybe you want your fullback to win that tackle. But overall, I think he did well. I didn't really understand Gary Neville in the second half, where he was talking about how Calafiori needed to be a proper left back and allow Gabriel Martinelli to step higher up the pitch. Like, in theory, I could understand what he was saying, but I was looking at the pitch and seeing the players that Manchester City had in that area, that if Calafiori had said to Martinelli, you go on ahead there, he would have been left 2-on-1.
Yeah.
All a bit odd, but...
and listen, whatever Arsenal did, it worked for 50 minutes. I think it is interesting about Calafiori starting. Look, Ben White obviously has some sort of issue, not that he'd tell the staff about it, I'm sure. They obviously had their concerns. But I think if this game was last season, I can imagine Ben White being pushed out to play. And I think it tells you about Arteta's... we wanted him to enter this season with more reliable depth, with more trustworthy options. And I think clearly picking Calafiori for this game shows that he feels he's got that now. Yeah,
and what a big contribution from him, and a sweet goal to get himself off the mark. Did you, or did anyone else out there immediately think of Thomas Vermaelen?
No, I didn't. What, just in terms of a left-footed defender still scoring on their debut?
Yeah, or banging one in from distance, which Vermaelen did quite a lot, and we don't score many goals from distance.
No, that's true. The goal I thought of was Saliba against Bournemouth. That clipped left-footed shot. But yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. If he's a guy who, I think he does like to get forward and be a threat, so that'd be another arrow in our quiver. But I mainly was just marvelling at how handsome he was, to be honest, and being envious of Mikel Arteta's hug on the touchline.
Yeah, he came over. I'm not sure Arteta really was into it that much. It was a bit weird reaction, but Calafiori obviously wanted to give props to the boss and, thanks for bringing me here and starting me in this game. So it's 1-1. And we saw Arsenal's prowess from set pieces. Gabriel almost scored. Jeremy Doku was the man tasked with stopping him, which seemed, I don't know, really fucking stupid to me. I'm not quite sure why that was the case. What made it even funnier, though, was the fact that they said, oh, actually, we can't do that. Let's put Kyle Walker on him for the next one.
And tickle him.
What was he doing? I mean, I know he's trying to put him off or trying to distract him or whatever, but Gabriel's just standing there. The way he shimmied one way and then, shaped to go one way, shimmied back the other way and left Walker for dead was just brilliantly dismissive forward play from a central defender, wasn't it? It was just like, get away from me. I'm going for the ball. And the timing of, as we talked about, last week, the timing of his runs, the timing of his jumps is second to none, I think. In world football, I can't think of any defender who is capable of doing what Gabriel does on such a consistent basis.
No, nor can I, really. I think he's clearly the outstanding player at it in the Premier League. And he's got the goals to show for it. And could have had two, really, on the day, as you say. A really good chance, wasn't it? Brilliant delivery from Saka. I mean, that shouldn't be overlooked as well. No. To repeat that quality of delivery, I mean, not just in this game, but across the course of this season, time and time again, finding those players at the back post. I think his set-piece delivery from that side has actually gone up a level as well. Listen, the tickling didn't work, Doku didn't work, Walker didn't work. I mean, in some respects, it'd be wrong to say I have sympathy with City, but I can understand, because how do you stop Gabriel? How do you stop Gabriel? Who can stop Gabriel?
They were talking about that on Sky, weren't they? And did Carragher say one time they were talking about playing against Duncan Ferguson when he was at Everton?
Yeah.
And they basically put two men on him.
Right.
Which, seems like probably the only thing that teams can do at this point, even if it's going to leave them overloaded somewhere, trying better to block off Gabriel and Gabriel's runs is easier said than done. But maybe if you do have an extra man, that's the only way you can do it. I mean, let them try, I guess.
Arsenal have got several other players, Saliba, Havertz, Calafiori if he plays. Gabriel is obviously the best of them at attacking that ball, but there are others there who are more than capable. So if you put 2 guys on Gabriel, it leaves space elsewhere, and I'm sure Nico Jova will be ready to exploit that.
No doubt. I think we should give Martinelli a little bit of props too for his work in the box, where he just sort of idled up alongside Ederson. I think Ederson was really weak on both of those. Did you see on Sky afterwards they did the split screen version of the 2 set pieces?
No, what, side by side?
No, one on top of the other.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so one on top of the other. I think they did it on Match of the Day as well, but they did it on Sky. So one on top of the other. It was basically the same free kick. And for both of them, Martinelli is in there. He's sort of just getting in the way. They did check for a block on the Gabriel goal. It would have been an absolute travesty if they decided to award that. I just think it's really, really weak goalkeeping from somebody who is, I guess, widely considered one of the best goalkeepers in the world. When you look at what David Raya did in the second half yesterday, the number of times that he came and took a cross, came and took a set piece, came and took a corner, with a man less on the pitch, it shows the difference in the 2 goalkeepers on the day. One was really, really proactive and had a brilliant game and helped ease the pressure that we were under, whereas Ederson, again, with credit to Saka and Gabriel and Martinelli, was still really, really weak, feeble, I think, on both those goals. I wouldn't be happy at all if I was a City fan, but if I was a City fan, I'd be an absolute twat and we wouldn't be talking this morning. So
that's very true. I mean, I do think, I find it interesting that Ederson and Addison, that's he doesn't exist. Ederson and Alisson are often kind of held up as the two, because for me, Alisson is streets ahead of Ederson. I think Ederson's ability with the ball at his feet maybe leads to a kind of disproportionate appreciation of his actual goalkeeping abilities. And I think that was evident on the goals that we saw yesterday. But yeah, we still did our job perfectly and, found ourselves 2-1 up. And like you, I was at that point in time really geared up for the second half. I thought, because it had been an entertaining game for a top of the table clash, and that some of these have felt like chess matches in the past. I think City's early goal actually was a brilliant thing for the game. I think it opened up and became actually quite interesting and quite good fun and quite entertaining. And crucially, we were winning. So yeah, I was obviously pretty disappointed by what happened just before half time. All
right, so how do you view it? Well, Trossard's on a yellow.
Yes, he is.
Fairly soft yellow, I think.
Yeah. Bit of a cynical, you see those given as yellows quite often, but I agree that it's kind of an away team yellow.
Yes, agree. So we're into the 8th minute of 6 minutes of injury time or added time in the first half. The ball is bouncing around. Trossard jumps into, I think it's Bernardo Silva. It's a fairly obvious foul. And the referee blows his whistle at the same time, more or less, as Trossard is either trying to make a pass to Martinelli or kick the ball. We know this rule, right?
Just a bit, yeah.
Just a bit. We know this rule better than anybody, mostly because it seems this rule is only applicable to us, right? There's the thing.
We need to check the wording, but it does feel a bit like that.
It does feel a bit like that. I've sort of gone back and forth on this a little bit. In that, I think ultimately Trossard has to be a little bit smarter. He can't give that referee, for all the complaints we might have, all the justifications and all the things he did and didn't do in the past and previous games, all of that, right? I get it. I think he does have to be smarter and just not allow Michael Oliver the opportunity to do what he did. But at the same time, I think this rule is a big load of shit, and I'll go into that afterwards, but I'm curious to get your take on it first.
No, I'm the same. I think that there are almost two discussions here. There's one which is like, what ought Arsenal have done? Given the parameters that exist, what could we have done differently or better? And then there's a separate discussion about whether the law is an ass, effectively, in this situation. I was a bit frustrated with Trossard in the moment, I have to say, because it was so costly, absurdly costly, more costly than it should probably be. But the more I think about it, the more sympathy I have with him. So I do think that after what happened with Declan Rice, and it was absolutely clear to us what PGMOL were trying to do around this rule and the way in which they were going to enforce it, particularly when it comes to us. Arteta should have a conversation with his players and say, don't give them the chance.
I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he must have done, right? Because, for all the talk about Arsenal becoming more street smart and better at the dark arts, well, part of all that is get away with what you can, but don't get caught out, right? Don't get sent off. Don't go down to 10 men. And we have been a lot better in that regard generally. That said, the time between the whistle blowing and Trossard kicking the ball is what?
Half a second? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think crediting Trossard with kind of conscious thought in that is a bit far-fetched. Like, I think what we saw is an impulse, and it's kind of an impulse that's been trained into him by, 15 years of competitive football. I mean, from the moment he started playing academy football, he would have been conceding free kicks and knocking the ball away, because that's what footballers have done for 20 years, or longer.
Yeah.
Probably as far back as you can think. And he's just acting on a reflex that is completely embedded.
Instinctual, yeah.
Yeah. So so sort of overriding that in the space of a second by being like, oh no, wait, the manager told me this. I just think in that sort of highly adrenaline-fueled pressure cooker environment, I can see why a player might, out of force of habit, do something they've done for their whole career.
I think he even tries to pull out of it a bit. He sort of...
Yeah, I've heard people say that.
He
maybe realises as he does it, it's like... this is the thing. I don't think that players are thinking about it that much. It's just, if you go back and watch any game over the last 10 years, the whistle blows, the player's not the ball away. I mean, it's just been happening for a long time. Now, there's a secondary discussion of like, does this matter? And what's the second part of what you were thinking about the law itself and how it's being applied?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. And I said this after the Declan Rice one, that it's just too harsh a punishment for a player to be sent off and suspended for a game for something,
a game and a half.
Yeah, for something as trivial as this. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, the stuff about Michael Oliver last season and Kovacic, he didn't want to send Kovacic off because he didn't want to overreact. He didn't want to negatively impact the game. Well, this time he negatively impacted the game. He could not wait to get his card out. Absolutely could not wait to get his card out. And I think it absolutely ruined what was a great game of football. And I think referees have to consider that. I think they really do. They have to consider, or somebody at the Premier League has got to sit down and say, is this what we want? For a team to be reduced to 10 men for something as essentially meaningless as that. Like if a player commits why are they so much stricter on things like this, and they ignore violent conduct time and time again? They're not anywhere as stringent about cracking down on violent conduct and bad tackles as they are about some small thing, a thing that they basically invented, right? My theory is they looked at this. Nobody was complaining about the restart being delayed. I didn't hear that discussion anywhere. The PGMOL or the Premier League have invented this thing as something they can crack down on and say, look, you must respect our authority on this. Look how strong we are at enforcing the rules. But nobody's saying this is a fucking stupid rule and nobody cares about it. Like if you're watching that game yesterday, right, and it's Man City versus Liverpool, and Liverpool go down to 10 men for something like that, what do? I'd fucking turn it off. That's what I would do. I would turn it off because the game is gone. It's ruined. I don't mean the game is gone, but I mean just that game as a spectacle is gone because it can only play out really one way. And I think what Arsenal did, to dig in and defend the way we did was extraordinary and it was heroic and all of those things. But I watched it because I was an Arsenal fan. I didn't watch it like I would have just turned it off. I think for neutrals, they would have said, this was a fucking great game. City were great. Arsenal got back into it as 2-1. Can't wait to see what's going on in the second half. And now it's over. And I think what we did was extraordinary, but objectively, it was an awful spectacle.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree. It did ruin the game. There's no doubt about that.
Completely ruined the game. And I just don't think there's any need to send a player off for something as trivial as that. I know the rules are the rules. And you know what bugs me as well is just how quickly this has been normalized. None of the pundits and none of the ex-players are saying, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? Why is this happening? It's all like, oh, he hasn't got a leg to stand on, said Gary Neville. Giving the referee no choice. All of this bullshit that we heard. And it's like, of course he had a choice. It was literally the last second of the first half, and Michael Oliver, as the referee could have done with the Declan Rice one, could have just said, listen, calm down here. We'll go in, half-time, have your fucking cup of tea or whatever. We'll come out, and this is going to be a good second half of football. But the referees, I think, are... I don't want to delve into any kind of conspiracy or anything like that, but too much, and I know you hate talking about referees, but too much of what we have to talk about is because of what referees are doing for no really good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest explanation of why they're doing this is because they are motivated to, and they are told this is a directive and we want to see it followed. And they probably get some sort of brownie points for abiding by that directive. I do slightly differ from you on it. I do think people were talking about it as an issue. Like, I remember our game against Newcastle, how little the ball was in play. I remember last season, do you remember there was that run of games where like Sam Dean was always tweeting out how long the ball was actually in play for?
Yeah.
And we were the victims, and we have been the victims of this in the past. Time wasting, running down the clock. I think what's happening at the start of this season is actually a bit of a quirk of the fixture list in some respects, because the games that we've had, the away games in particular, have been games in which it has maybe suited us to delay or, where we've played almost more as the kind of underdog is the wrong word.
No, I know what you mean.
Back foot a little bit. Whereas you'd think across the course of the season, you'd think this would be a rule that should benefit Arsenal. Like 80, 90% of the time, we're going to be the ones attacking, controlling the game, not trying to slow it down, trying to set the tempo and keep it up. You would think. But so far, it's not been like that. And I do think it's a really... I think it's a really tricky one in terms of what is the appropriate punishment. Because I completely agree with you that missing a game and a half of football for what Leandro Trossard did, which is a split-second kind of impulse reaction, and one that doesn't, frankly, hurt anybody. I mean, Gary Neville said he might not have a leg to stand on. Well, sometimes we see our players suffer challenges that could leave them without a leg to stand on, and they go unpunished, right? So what's the real focus here? And I think there's got to be a different way of looking at this problem. I mean, I had a comment on YouTube from a guy, Death by Deadeye, who said in Gaelic games, the punishment for delaying or denying a quick free kick is the team gets to take the free kick from 10 yards further up the pitch. Is something like that a better way of dealing with this issue, if it is an issue?
Yeah, I think it is. Maybe you consider sin bin. I don't know, but it seems extraordinarily harsh for a player, as you say, to miss a game and a half of football, particularly when the second half of football was nearly a fucking hour long. For something as small as that. And I think the other aspect of it, James, is the sort of going back to my sort of throwaway comment when we started this is this rule being applied to everybody?
Yeah.
Totally. And I completely take your point about time wasting, and it is frustrating when you're on the other end of time wasting. I don't know that problem is solved by this solution when it comes to delaying the restart. I think it was always within the power of the referee and the officials to deal with time wasting by simply adding on more time. Instead, they've created this new rule, which is, you've suggested maybe players are taking a bit of time to get used to because of the way they've always behaved. But I don't know that is necessarily the solution for teams that waste time. The goalkeeper takes ages to take a kick out, add it on at the end. If they stand in front of a free kick, part of it, of course, is like, can you exploit space with a quick free kick? Like if Leandro Trossard yesterday, if Man City had got that free kick and were ready to take it and Trossard stood in front of the ball and kicked it away, I'd have no complaints about a yellow card because he's denied City that chance to restart the game and maybe catch us on the hop the way that we caught them for our goal, right? But this was not that. I mean, the City player was on the floor. They weren't even going to take a free kick. I mean, he literally blew up for half time a few seconds later. I just don't think this is the solution to that problem. And I don't understand why people who are involved, in talking about the game, writing about the game, are just simply accepting this as something we have to live with now, rather than saying this is not the right way to do it. And I know I say this as, fan of a team that has had a player sent off twice now for this. So, maybe I am slightly biased about this, but I don't think any player should have been sent off for what Declan Rice did and miss a game and a half. And I don't think any player in the Premier League should be sent off for what Leandro Trossard did and miss a game and a half. It's just wrong on every level.
Yeah, it's too heavy-handed. And I think, look, one interesting idea, again, would be to have a stop clock. Have the ball in play for 60 minutes. When the ball's out of play, when the whistle's blown, the clock stops. That would completely solve the issue. It'd be quite radical, but it would take it away. Alternatively, you could do something like, if you delay the restart, you get 30 seconds added on to stoppage time, or a minute added on to stoppage time, whatever it is. It's just a de facto thing that's like, bam, you get that on the clock, almost like a penalty timer. I suppose the issue with that is the nature of football is that, who needs the time could swing at the end of the game, right? If there's an equaliser and suddenly you need a goal again or what have you. I don't know. I think I will be watching very closely to see when the games come around, as they surely will, where in theory this law is in our favour. Is it enforced as emphatically as it has been on us so far?
Yeah.
Because I'm with you, and I'm not watching every Premier League game, and I'm not across all the yellow card data, and I have to hold my hands up to that, but it does feel like we've really suffered from this. In the back of my mind, I have this thought of, well, that is partly because of the games we've had and the type of games and the nature of them and defending leads and things like that. But yeah, moving forward, I keep thinking about João Pedro.
Yeah.
Just booting the ball into touch with no consequence.
Yeah. I know we slightly differ on the Doku one yesterday, but technically he does delay the restart because it's obvious Declan Rice is going to be the guy to take the free kick, and he kicks the ball beyond Declan Rice, And, I just think if you're going to apply the letter of the law to all of those situations, then, we could still complain and say it's a shit rule, but at least it's being enforced.
Like if we start getting players sent off against us for it, we might come to like it a bit more. But I don't know, and
no.
It's got to happen.
No, I don't like it. I don't think, like I said, I don't think players should be sent off for that. Maybe the consequence of this kind of rule or enforcement of this kind of rule is you have to change the way the disciplinary process works. Maybe it is a 5-minute sin bin. Maybe that's the consequence for this, rather than 2 yellow cards and a sending off. It's just not proportionate to what's going on.
Another piece of mitigation for Trossard, by the way, is I don't think we can rule out the possibility, given that we were sort of 1 or 2 minutes beyond the allotted stoppage time period. I don't think we can rule out the possibility that he assumed that was the end of the half. Because how many times do you see that?
Yeah.
Player boots the ball up in the air. I think that's a possibility as well. And look, and I'll come back round to the idea that, like, I don't want to see another Arsenal player doing this. Like, if these are the rules and we seem to be up against it as regards the officiating, we've got to stop doing it.
100%. That's the only thing we can control.
Yeah, that's the bit we can control. But, it's still incredibly frustrating.
It was so frustrating as well, wasn't it? Because you're thinking you're going into halftime on a high, and then you realize what you've got to contend with. And with all due respect, if there's a team in the world you don't want to play with 10 men against for 45 minutes or more, much more as it turns out, it is Manchester City. We've been there, done that, worn that T-shirt many times. We seem to have a lot of players sent off when we play Manchester City. And most of the time, it hasn't worked out well for us, Yeah. So I went from being really excited about the first half or about the second half to absolutely dreading it. Like, I don't think I've ever sat there at halftime and gone, I really fucking could do without this. I could do without watching this, because I know how hard it's going to be. And I kind of knew what we were going to do. I knew how we would try and play it, because I don't think there really is any other way to try and hold out against Manchester City with 10 men when they're at home, other than to play in a deep defensive block, particularly when that is something that you are really good at, which is what Arsenal are. And that organisation, that defensive discipline, was something we obviously leaned into. Ben White came on for Bukayo Saka. But man alive, it was just like a procession of chances and half chances and speculative shots, and the Arsenal players really, really working hard and putting in a huge defensive effort for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 50 odd minutes, whatever it was, until such time as that equaliser went in. I think they deserve a huge amount of credit for almost getting us over the line.
And actually, although it was hell for us, I think some of those players enjoyed it. I think some of them relished it. The likes of Gabriel and Saliba and Raya. I think you could see in them this enormous desire to see this out.
Yeah.
And I think that does them, great credit as characters. It's exactly what you want from your defenders. I have to admit, I was a bit perturbed that we just had absolutely no outlet. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, there's not even anyone on the halfway line to theoretically boot the ball clear to.
No, I get it. I understand that as well. I mean, it would be nice. It would have been nice if we could have that. But when you look at the way City were creating overloads, I think what Arsenal did really well, was to ensure that the people who were on the ball the most were Ruben Diaz and Manuel Akanji.
Well, and I think kind of the perverse thing about the scenario. If you're Man City, you almost want to say, you want to flip your team, really. You want to say, okay, Diaz and Akanji,
Get in the box.
You go and occupy space in the box. Exactly, yeah. And Bernardo Silva, Haaland, De Bruyne, Foden, whoever else you are, you stay at the back and make something happen.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I couldn't
don't do that.
I thought it was so weird. I thought Foden in particular is somebody who's very dangerous from the edge of the box or just outside the box. He came on, obviously, and had a couple of moments, some shots. I think Arsenal blocked 13 shots yesterday in that second half.
Some mad stats from that half.
Yeah, 24 shots, I think, for Manchester City in that half. But what we did was we made sure that when the ball got to the wide areas, which is where they can actually probably cause you more danger, we just forced them back. So it was Akanji and Diaz again, Kovacic sometimes, players who are obviously accomplished technical players but don't possess necessarily the kind of goal threat that you would expect. So I think Arsenal did really well in that regard, and we had to change things out a little bit as well. There were substitutions made. Calafiori ran out of steam. Timber ran out of steam. We had to bring on a 17-year-old. I'll talk about him in part 2 because I've got a question about that. And like you say, just that slight lapse from that corner, and they got a lucky break, and John Stones is there to make it 2-2. And I think City's reaction to that goal said a lot about not just the game itself, but about how they view, going back to what we were talking about at the start, going back to how they view our threat and our position in this league now, and our growth and our progression, and the fact that we've made up so much ground on them in a very short space of time.
Yeah, listen, it was a gut punch to concede that goal. But I think if we step back, I think to keep City to 1 with 10 men for an entire half plus however many minutes of stoppage time is pretty good going. I think to come away with a point, having played over a half with 10 men, is pretty good going. I don't think it hurts us in our league standing, and I think Arsenal's players will back themselves very strongly to be able to beat City at the Etihad. And I think actually what we saw yesterday will only fuel that belief. At the Emirates, I mean, rather. Yeah. So it was a good result and a good point, but just cruel circumstances.
Yeah, it felt cruel, but I do think ultimately, when we think about what we could take away from this game, Mikel Arteta will lean into the effort and the way that Arsenal denied Man City for so long in that second half. I think he'll point to what you said about the first half, about the way they responded, the way they came back, the way they got in front, having gone a goal down, and then he will say, look at how we nullified them with 10 men and with players who aren't fully fit and with players missing, first team players like Martin Odegaard, like Mikel Merino, who would have been, probably a valuable player to have yesterday in the midfield, whether from the start with 11 men or with 10 as the second half played out. I think he's going to lean into all of the positive things that he can take away from this. And the fact, again, City talking about Arsenal time wasting, Arsenal with the dark arts, Arsenal making it difficult for us. He's going to pin all of that up on the dressing room wall and say, look, you are under their skin now. It wasn't long ago that we were sort of an irrelevance to Manchester City. That connection was there, the Arteta-Guardiola thing, that was there. But City just kind of had to turn up and win. And that's not the case anymore. And I think something has shifted. I really think something has shifted in the dynamic from yesterday.
I think so too. And I think it would have been even more significant and special had we got the long-awaited win there. But even without that, I do know what you mean. It does feel like the plates have moved slightly. And I think the comments of the Man City players, maybe even the comments of Rodri at the end of last season, show that, that there's something there, that there's a dislike of Arsenal.
Yeah.
And because they perceive us as a threat. And yes, nobody, it'll be interesting because nobody can say of this point that we got what they did in the spring. Nobody can say Arsenal didn't come to play because we did in that first half.
Mm-hmm.
We went forward, we scored 2 goals. And then we had to show another face entirely in the second half and did that too. So in that respect, it was a very complete performance. And this without our captain and one of our best players. So I was really encouraged. I was as encouraged as I was ultimately, deflated.
Gutted but proud, I think, is the way that I would put it. Absolutely sickened by that goal and the timing of it, because it feels kind of ridiculous to say it. I wanted it for them, having done so much. Obviously, I wanted it for my own personal reasons, but I felt so gutted for them. Did you see the reaction of Havertz when the goal goes in? He just sort of throws himself dramatically to the ground. He's like, "Oh God, we got almost." But I think they will come away from this game, despite that feeling of disappointment because we were so close to taking all 3 points. I think they will come away from that game taking away more positives, more belief, more motivation, more progression, more development, things that bring a team together. Sort of like, look, I don't want to say it, it's going to be the same thing or anything like that because it's wrong, but it sort of reminds me of the 0-0 at Old Trafford in the Invincible season when we played with 10 men when Vieira was harshly sent off. If you remember, for not kicking Van Nistelrooy? He just sort of kicked
kicking out towards Van Nistelrooy.
Yes, and didn't actually kick him. And then, of course, there was that penalty moment, and he missed, and the Martin Keown, and the brawl, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but if I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm leaning into that ballpark of what it could mean for my team and how I can bring them together even more. This is clearly a very close group of players, all pulling in the same direction, all willing to work really, really hard for each other. Ben White coming on, despite the fact he was, carrying an injury and couldn't play, just to dig in and do his bit to try and see out that game. I think it can only consolidate that.
Yeah, what's an interesting parallel you draw to that United game? The tensions between the teams, the fine line between sort of victory and defeat. And even those scenes between the players after the equaliser, 17-year-old Myles Lewis-Skelly getting in Erling Haaland's face.
Love it.
It could, had Martin Keown been on the pitch, it could have easily bubbled over into something else. But I think as well, I would mention the Newcastle game last season and the goal that was allowed that Arsenal felt shouldn't have been. I think that was a galvanising game in some ways for the group, and I think saw us through the next period pretty well. I think this could be the same. We know Mikel Arteta likes to use these things to motivate and inspire. And I think the team will come out of this in good shape. And we have survived a dreadful start in terms of fixtures. I mean, a really, really hard start to the season. Those 3 away games, Spurs, Villa and City, we come away with 7 from 9. I think that's very, very good indeed. I
agree. And I suppose one aspect of yesterday as well that we should mention is that this was our 3rd away game. North London derby, Atalanta on Thursday. So we're doing the Thursday-Sunday thing. City had a home game. No, they were away, were they?
No, they were at home on the Wednesday.
They were at home on Wednesday, so they have an extra day of rest. We're playing our 3rd away game. We've got injuries up the wazoo, and that group of players still put in that kind of effort, which I think is hugely admirable. Even if we didn't get the win, we came away with a result, as you say, 7 points from 9 from Villa, Spurs, and Man City away. Anyone would have taken that, I think. I think if you'd said to people yesterday, would you come away with a draw? I'd have taken that. The circumstances of it are horrible, but you have to sort of, in the cold light of day, look at it for what it is. And I don't really view that as 2 points dropped per se. I know we came very close, but I think, as this season goes on, we'll look at that as a very, very valuable point.
Yeah, and it might prove to be 2 points drop for City.
Yeah.
At home to their title rivals against 10 men, only getting the one goal. They may come to regret that. So it's very early days, and nothing we've done so far has done anything to, suggest that we are not a significant force this season, and probably the closest to Manchester City. Liverpool may be around there as well. But I think it's a good result, and unfortunately, just the timing of that last goal that makes it a bit of a sickener.
Okay, well, look, we should take a little break here. We've obviously got a few more bits and bobs that we can discuss and questions from you guys, so we'll do that in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on threads at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. I'm going to go first, if that's all right. We mentioned him in part 1 just towards the end there, but Jam Sido on Discord... he says, maybe missed in everything, but how big is it that Myles Lewis-Skelly came on at 17 and did well, also showed the balls to get in Haaland's face at the end? I enjoyed the fact that he picked up his first Premier League booking before he got his first Premier League minutes. That was quite a thing.
Yeah. Was there ever any clarity on what that was for? I heard one suggestion mooted that he was booked for telling David Raya to go down.
Really?
An injury. Yeah.
Wow.
Had you heard anything to the contrary?
No, I just assumed he said something to an official or somebody.
Right.
Or maybe, I don't know.
I'm not sure, but that's what somebody suggested to me. Interesting as well. Nwaneri came on, didn't he, in the North London derby? Lewis-Skelly here. Who did he come on for? Do you remember?
It was Timber.
Timber,
and
92nd minute.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting because I had thought in the difficulty of that game that Arteta might just lean into experience. And my thought when I saw Timber go down was, right, he's going to bring Jorginho on and he's going to put Partey at right back.
Yeah, or drop Rice in, to the back line somewhere. He had options.
But he went with a 17-year-old.
Yeah, who's not even really played a huge amount of football as a defender in his life.
So I thought that was interesting. It's maybe a little show of faith. And that's a very difficult game to come into, a very difficult atmosphere to go into.
On a booking as well, by the way.
Oh, yeah, of course. Imagine he just steamed into someone and got sent off.
I did wonder, does Mikel know he's on a booking? But, that is a show of faith, and it does feel significant. What a massive game for him to be part of.
Yeah.
What a crazy game in which, was that his senior debut?
Yeah, I think so.
Premier League debut,
League debut, anyway. I'll look it up while we're talking, but I think...
a pretty memorable one. I thought that was quite telling. And I imagine we'll see more of him on Wednesday. Because we've got Bolton in the
Carabao Cup. I think it is going to be a slightly stronger team than people might like, but
Stan Ben said, who will play in defence against Bolton? I assume Kivior, but who else can we rotate in? I think Lewis-Skelly will probably play as a left back.
Yeah, Kivior is one of the centre halves. I wonder if we might see Aidan Heaven. If Ben White is injured, maybe he does Saliba again. I don't know. Who's going to play at right back? Timber's played a lot. Is there a young right back?
White, doesn't it? Josh Nichols.
Josh Nichols played during the summer.
but unlike Heaven, Lewis-Skelly and Ranieri, he's not been kind of in all the first team pictures, first day of school pictures.
Yeah. I mean, we had a question about who's going to play in goal from Stiggy309 on Discord. Given that Neto is cup tied, would you play Raya on Wednesday? Or would you like to see young Tommy Setford given some game time? I think he's injured. Setford.
Is he?
I think so.
Yeah. Was he not on the bench for the Atalanta game?
No, we had like a 16-year-old.
Yes, who I think was the youngest ever goalkeeper on a Champions League squad. He's like 16 years old and 2 months or something mad like that.
Yeah.
Jack Porter.
Porter, yeah.
I think I would play David Raya, to be honest with you. I think that the fatigue issue, it is a thing for goalkeepers, but I don't think to the same extent. And I think that the continuity that he would give us and the experience might be particularly valuable if we are playing quite a young defence.
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to see Lewis-Skelly and Nwaneri start this game.
I'm sure they will. I really think they will. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are probably some more senior players alongside them than some of us might like.
Yeah, maybe on your midfield could be Jorginho, Lewis-Skelly. Trossard is suspended for this game, obviously. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we will see Jesus. I think we'll see Sterling start.
Yeah, first start for
I think
Sterling,
we could.
sure.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Saka start, given that he only played 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Saka or Martinelli, there are options. Havertz, I think, might just need to sit one out. I mean, that
Eventually,
guy.
Yeah.
That guy, holy shit. I commented on it in the live blog at one point, but, we pushed up a little bit in the second half against Man City. I can't remember the exact time, but it was late in the game, and you could just see him bursting back. The effort he put in to get down or to get back into shape, it's just unbelievable. It was like the 80th minute, something like that.
It's incredible, isn't it? When we were talking about signing Havertz and what we might expect and speak to fans of other clubs, nobody said, oh, by the way, he's a super athlete and gives absolutely everything in his body every single game for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
No one ever mentioned that.
No, I never heard that.
Maybe it wasn't true. I don't know.
Maybe not.
But he's become that guy.
He's bought in.
Man, he's extraordinary, honestly. The guy, what an athlete. You have to admire it. And he produces it so consistently as well. Him and Declan Rice, physically, are kind of second to none, I think, in the Premier League. When you combine their kind of power with their sort of respiratory fitness, I mean, it's unbelievable. Just been having a quick look at Bolton, by the way. 18th in League One. Won 2 of their 6 games in the league so far this season. So you have to think, although we've got some, we had some right ding-dongs with Bolton back in their Premier League days, you'd have to think that almost whatever 11 Arteta puts out should have enough, I think, to win this game.
And it should give him the scope to give minutes, important developmental minutes as well, to the likes of Lewis-Skelly and to Nwaneri, if they are seen as the jewels in the crown of the academy at this point in time. They need to play. And this is a perfect time and a perfect way to give them that opportunity. Like, if you trust Nwaneri in the latter stages of a North London derby, and if you trust Lewis-Skelly in the context of what we saw yesterday, albeit for a short period of time and albeit forced, you should have enough to trust them to play games against a team like Bolton, with all due respect.
Oh, for sure. Yeah? For sure. And also, this game isn't only useful for them. I mean, imagine if we beat Bolton and Jesus gets a goal and Sterling gets a goal. I do think that heading into the game against Leicester at the weekend, suddenly our attacking options feel a lot more lively and promising, So I think it's a really important game for players like them too. Actually, we had a question about Jesus from Sweat Monster. What a name. Morning, gents. Gabriel Jesus looked pretty great in his cameo, playing what looked like a more 8-ish role. although it was hard to tell what actual formation we were in at that point. I don't think the manager would actually entertain playing him there, but in your minds, should he?
No.
An emphatic no.
No, I just don't really see him as that player. I think his skill sets apply themselves to different areas of the pitch. Anywhere across the front three, absolutely. But as the 8, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. I don't think that would be the right way to use him. And I don't think he'd be comfortable.
The precedent of a striker going into kind of number 8 and thriving is Joe Linton, really. He's been transformed by that. But I'm just not sure, as physical as Jesus can be, I'm not sure that he has that kind of Rice, Havertz...
security.
Yeah, like physical resilience to survive as well in that part of the pitch. Maybe that's a fair... I wouldn't rule it out. I think he has got some of the traits. I also think just stamina-wise as well, like the amount of ground he'd have to cover, I don't think that would play to his strengths and his current physical state.
Yeah.
But he's a very useful player to have in your squad, and he did do some nice bits of defending in that kind of left-back area. Although there was one where he sort of ended up dribbling the ball out for a corner, which was a bit of a shame.
I think what he was trying to do there...
he was trying to get the foul, wasn't he?
He was trying to get the foul and just ease the pressure, use his experience to invite the challenge and go down. And unfortunately, it went out for a corner, and then, the pressure continued. But I could see what he was trying to do there. There was part of me going, just get rid of it up the pitch. But at the same time...
it's only coming straight back.
It's only coming straight back, and this is the kind of thing that Granit Xhaka did brilliantly, by the way, was to win free kicks in those areas by sort of using his body and using the contact from other players. But no, I'd be very surprised to see Jesus in a midfield position. What about this? Critical T. Another game, another stellar performance from David Raya. Can we give Iñaki Kenya's eye for talent some praise after the criticism he has endured in recent windows? I don't think anyone else saw Raya performing to this level. And I think there's a wider question, and I've seen it posited. I can't find a perfect example of it, though. Is Raya's prominence this season so far, does it worry you slightly that he is being asked to do that much? Do you think it's maybe just a consequence of some of the fixtures and the way those fixtures have played out, like playing 10 men against City, 10 men against Brighton, away at Spurs, away at Villa? Does that worry you a little bit, or is it just maybe a measure of where we are so far this season in the games we've played and how they've sort of played out, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think it's the fixture list. I do. I think that these are games where you're going to need your goalkeeper. And he has made some extraordinary saves already this season. But, coming up, we've got, he might play against Bolton. Then in the league, we've got Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth. I hope we're not still talking about David Raya as our player of the season after those games.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Me too.
If we are, something's probably gone wrong. But he has been excellent. And it's a special relationship he has with Iñaki Kanya. I don't know if you saw this, but after he came and claimed that corner kick in the 95th minute, or whatever it was, and it was a brilliant take and alleviated the pressure on all the defenders around him. You could tell how thrilled they were. You could tell how excited Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were as ex-defenders in the commentary box. But they cut to Arteta on the sidelines, and Iñaki was actually behind him doing the kind of "we are not worthy" bowing down hands.
A single tear running down his cheek.
Yeah, that's his boy. Yeah, I think we do have to give him some credit. I mean, he kind of discovered David Raya in that Raya was playing at Blackburn, possibly in League One or in the Championship, I forget. And Brentford were a Championship club at the time, and Iñaki basically personally identified and recruited Raya to come to Brentford and work with him. He always wanted Raya at Arsenal. It was always his preference. And he's got him now. And you can see why he was quite so obsessive about it. And, I'm sure Raya would credit Iñaki with a significant role in his development. It's an interesting one because a lot of keepers that we've had probably don't feel that great about Iñaki Kanya. Most of them aren't at the club anymore. But David Raya and Iñaki Kanya do get along and have a great relationship, and it does seem to benefit him as a player. So I don't know. There's something about that chemistry that definitely works.
Yeah. I think he's been sensational. He has made 24 saves already this season, which says something about...
Probably about half what he made last season. And I'm only half joking there.
No, I know. Yeah, I should look that up, actually.
We could look that up. I mean, and I'm sure he made saves here and there, but it did feel... I mean, he wasn't being called upon like he's right now. And I don't think it's because we're defending poorly. I think it is the nature of the games. But let's reassess, shall we, after Bournemouth and see what we've seen of him in that time, because I'd love him to be less busy. For his sake as well.
Okay. I just have a quick look at the stats here from FBref. Last season at Arsenal, he made 45 saves from 69 shots on target, which is a save percentage of 68.1%.
That's in the course of the season. He made 45 saves.
Yes.
And he's already made how many?
23 from 26 shots on target, which is a save rate of 88.5%.
I mean, that's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. But also very striking, isn't it? That there have been a lot of attempts on goal. I do think that is partly dictated by who we've played. But let's hope that kind of evens out a bit over the next few games.
Yeah, I'd like him to have a couple of quiet games.
I'd love a few games where David Raya doesn't make a save and none of our players get sent off for kicking the ball away. Just a few games like that would be nice. For my heart rate, you know?
I could live with that.
Yeah.
I think you're expecting a little bit too much.
Yeah, maybe. These crazy idealistic football fans that want everything. But Raya's been excellent. I mean, honestly, he's been superb. It is true to say that if you were taking a poll right now, Arsenal's best player so far, I think he'd walk it.
Yeah, player of the season so far. Long way to go, though. Long way to go.
Long way to go. And like I say, I'm hoping some of our forward players start claiming that mantle for themselves before too long. Speaking of one of those players, question from Rubes, who said, "Morning, gents. So many different emotions, not sure if it's a goodly morning or what. I know how you feel. Perhaps overlooked because so much happened this game, but how great was it to see Saka given the armband? It feels like something that should have happened more by now, but hasn't. And it felt so good to see, especially it was a big game and he was turning in a great performance with 2-inch perfect corner deliveries."
Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it. I don't know what more I can say, that he is a cornerstone of this team, both technically, and I think he is growing, as you would expect. He's 23 now, is he? Is he just gone 23?
I think so. Yeah.
I think his birthday, I think he's a September birthday as well. 5th of September. So he's just turned 23 years of age. And I think you can see that he is now, I don't know, it sounds patronizing to say he's a man now or whatever. You know what I mean? But I think he has grown up, and we talked about it last week after the derby, that when it kicked off between Vicario and Jurriën Timber, who was the first guy over? It was Bukayo Saka. He's not a kid anymore. He's got the experience. He's played God knows how many games for us. Is one of our best players. He is an example of not just how to play, but how to live. I think that's something that Arteta would be very keen to stress as well. Like the professionalism, the desire he has to, play as much as he does and contribute as much as he does. Those are leadership qualities. and people can mistake a guy shouting a lot as a leader. That guy can just be a loudmouth,
Yeah.
And I think what Saka does and has done in an Arsenal shirt 100% merited him taking the armband yesterday, and I don't think it'll faze him one bit, and I'm sure we'll see it a bit more in the years to come. Obviously, when Odegaard's fit, he's the captain, but I think it's nice for him as well to get that recognition, particularly for a big game like this. Unfortunate for him that he had to come off.
Were you a bit surprised that he came off?
A little bit, but I wonder. I think they thought about Martinelli as cover for. I think it was either him or Martinelli that had to come off. And I'm not saying Bukayo Saka wouldn't do his work or anything like that. I think he absolutely would have, but I think the way City play is so weighted to their right-hand side that Martinelli seemed the obvious guy to stay on. And actually, you said it in the first half, I think this was a really, really impressive performance from Gabriel Martinelli.
Mm-hmm.
In the first half, he was very good. In the second half, he was so diligent defensively. He really, really was. He helped Calafiori out for all Gary Neville's nonsense about, he needs to be higher up the pitch and Calafiori needs to be this, that or the other. It just completely ignored the fact that City would have overloaded Calafiori if Martinelli hadn't been there for him. So I was surprised in that, he was the captain for the day and he's one of our best players, and ideally you wouldn't take him off, but I sort of understood it in the context of what we tried to do in that second half.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think he was excellent. I was surprised to see Saka come off just because we're not used to it, seeing that sight. But pleased from. I think he'd worn the armband before. I think maybe this was his second game as captain, but to be captain in such a big game, fitting recognition really of everything he's done. I've got one more that I'd like to ask.
Yes,
squeeze it in.
Squeeze it in.
It's from Ode to Martin. Morning, guys. I'm genuinely not one to celebrate injuries, but is a potentially significant Rodri absence the swing we might need to close the gap to City?
He's so important for them.
Yeah. And it was a big moment in the first half. I don't think it's coincidence that the first half kind of swung on that.
I think it was a big part of the first half for sure. Because he's as much as I dislike him, he is an unbelievable player. Maybe something quite, is ironic the right word, where I think Rodri was in the news before the game talking about the demands on players and whether or not players might have to go on strike at some point because of the amount of football they're being asked to play, and then falling victim to an injury which, he was in a tussle with Thomas Partey, wasn't he? But it wasn't a foul or anything like that. He just landed badly and injured his knee. In the same way that people would consider it's advantageous to them if Arsenal are without Martin Odegaard for some period of time, I think it's obvious to say that it would be advantageous for other teams if Rodri were not available for a while. But I think the best teams generally find a way to cope without big players. And we've done that, I think, this week. We've shown that we can do that. I think our football, has been pragmatic. I think it's been interesting that because of the fixtures we faced, Arteta hasn't tried to replace Odegaard, has he? He's just done it differently. He's just picked a different kind of team to cope without Odegaard. Will City miss Rodri if he's out for an extended period of time? Absolutely, they will. Is that good for us? Yes. But I still think they have such quality and depth. You looked at their bench yesterday and it's like, they're bringing on Foden and Grealish, are they? Very nice. They have the ability to cope. So it can be good for us. It doesn't necessarily mean it will be. And I also think you have to look at the league and look at some of the other teams playing and some of the other results to see that Man City are not the only contenders this year. Liverpool have been very good, and you can't ignore them. It's not just a two-horse race. I don't think, anyway.
No. Well, Liverpool, was it this weekend that they lost?
No, they lost last weekend. They won 3-0 against Bournemouth.
They lost to Forest last weekend. Yeah, that's it. I'm out of touch. Yeah, they've largely been very good. They had that one aberration, didn't they? And Aston Villa are right up there as well, in fairness to them. So, yeah, interesting times. But we've got a game in hand on quite a few teams too, I think. Oh, no, we've played that now. We get an old version of a table. So, yeah, I can't remember. Rodri, if he is out for a protracted period, I mean, City's results with and without him last season were pretty dramatically different. So it could be really good for Arsenal.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it didn't look
great.
Didn't look great.
It did look more, though, like he sort of, when sometimes if you land and your knee slightly extends or hyperextends and bounces back. I don't know
he
what. He
walked off the pitch, didn't he?
Yeah, so did Timber, though, didn't he? Last season, he walked off the pitch, or did he?
True.
I think he did, And I'm not wishing injury on anyone. I just feel like it would be obviously an advantage if that were the case. All right, I think we should get this out to everybody.
Sure.
Because I'm sure people are dying for podcasts today, and I'll be tucking into a few myself a bit later on. You can join myself and Phil this afternoon talking about the rest of the weekend's Premier League action in the 30 over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Arseblog. Just $6 a month if you want to sign up and get access to all the stuff we do over there. For now, though, take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.